Hey, what's up everyone? Zach D Productions here, and I'm here with a list video for you guys. Now for this list, I'll be going over bands where I believe their second album is their best album. Now I did a list like this for bands where I believe their first album, their debut is their best, so why not do the same for second albums? Except this time, this is going to be more of a lengthy list, and I think one of the main reasons for that is because I think this does apply to a lot of bands. I think there's a lot of bands out there where their second album is their best. And I think this is because this is where a lot of bands find their sound. Like, this is where they find out who they are, you could say. Because let's be honest here, even though there are some great debuts out there, I mean, obviously I've made a list of bands where I think their debut is their best, but a lot of bands, they're still kind of just trying to find their way, you could say. So I think that's why you'll see more albums for a list for second albums. I have about 7 albums to go over here. Now, there could be more I could have added on this list, but I wanted to keep this rather short, so I just narrowed this list down to just 7 albums. So let's go ahead and get started. And this list is in no particular order, by the way. So I think the first one we'll start off with here is Linkin Park with their second album, Meteora. Easily their best work in my opinion. Of course, rest in peace to Chester Bennington. So I have the standard version right here, and then I have the anniversary edition of Meteora. Great album for sure. You really can't go wrong with any of the songs on this album. I mean, Nobody's Listening is probably my least favorite on the album, but I still think it's a decent song, and it's grown on me a little bit. It's still the weakest song on the album, in my opinion, but I still think it's decent for what it is. So, yeah, but the songs on this album you can't go wrong with. I mean, some of my favorites would be Don't Stay, of course, Somewhere I Belong, and you got Lying From You, one of the more underrated songs, in my opinion, from this album. You also got Easier to Run, which is very melodic, very emotional. You also got Faint, one of the shining lights on this album, you could say. One of the singles, one of the big hits on here. Figure .09, another underrated track from this album. Breaking the Habit, which is maybe my all-time favorite Linkin Park track, to be honest. I love this song. I can never get sick of it. From the Inside is also a very solid song. And of course, you have the classic Numb, which everybody has listened to. It's a great song for sure. So you get the band's best material on here, whether we're talking the instrument work, you know, the other stuff that they do musically, and Chester's vocals. I mean, this is where Linkin Park was at their best, in my opinion. I mean, when it comes to their latest release, From Zero, with their new vocalist, Emily Armstrong, I'm going to be honest, I think the album is just decent. It's not really one that I return to that much, if I'm being honest, but I still think it's a decent album for what it is. But Meteora, I don't think Linkin Park will ever reach the heights that this album has. So there you go. Meteora from Linkin Park. So next we have System of a Down with their album Toxicity, which I think a lot of people can agree that this is easily System of a Down's best album. It has their best songs. It has some of my favorite System songs, like, of course, Prison Song and Needles and Chop Suey, which is, of course, one of the band's biggest songs. I mean, you just can't go wrong with that song. Even though you could argue it's overplayed or it's now a meme or whatever, it's still a great song for what it is. Forest is another great track. Science, another good one. Shimmy, also really good. Of course, the title track. And Aerials. There's a lot of very solid stuff on this album. Some of their best work for sure. System of a Down, I know, is not a band that's going to be for everyone, but I mean, they are successful for a reason, of course, and I think they make great music. And I will say that I was one of those people that was kind of like, I'm not sure how to feel about this band, but their music has really grown on me, and maybe that's because I've opened up my mind more musically. So System of a Down, Toxicity, definitely their best work. It has their catchiest songs and just their best songwriting. I mean, it's just all in all a great album. So Toxicity by System of a Down. Next, we have Metallica with their second album, Ride the Lightning. And for the longest time, I have stated that this is easily my favorite Metallica album, and I would say it is their best album. Has their best songwriting, and I think it's one of their heaviest albums too. I mean, maybe not as crazy or as intense as their debut Kill 'Em All, but Ride the Lightning is still pretty heavy. It's still a pretty heavy record for what it is. I mean, you can't go wrong with any of the songs on this album. I mean, this is a 10 out of 10 album in my personal opinion. You just can't go wrong with anything off this album. Yes, I even do like the song Escape, which I know the band themselves, I can't remember if it was the band themselves or just James Hetfield himself that stated that he wasn't a fan of this song, like he wasn't really that crazy about it. But I like this song. I mean, is it the weakest song on the album? Probably, but I still think it's a really good song. I mean, of course you do have classics on here like Fight Fire with Fire, Ride the Lightning, the title track, which is definitely one of my favorite Metallica songs. And when I saw them live, that song was a really great, that was a really great song to see them play live. I mean, that was a blast, seeing them live and playing that song. And some of the other songs on here too, like Fade to Black, it was really fun seeing them perform that song too. Of course, one of the more, you could say, emotional Metallica songs, and maybe my favorite Metallica song too. I don't know. I really love the song Fade to Black, the solo work, and just everything about it, the way it flows, just great track. And of course, For Whom the Bell Tolls is another great song from this band, and it's one of their biggest hits for sure. Trapped Under Ice, and once again, Escape. Those are pretty good songs. Yeah, the deeper cuts on this album, they're not bad. They're really good. Creeping Death, another one of my favorite Metallica songs. I believe when I saw Metallica live, they did play that song too, which was really fun to see. And of course, The Call of Cthulhu, the instrumental, really solid instrumental, maybe one of their best instrumentals too. So there you have it. Ride the Lightning from Metallica, excellent album, 10 out of 10 in my opinion, easily their best work, I would say. So next we have 3 Days Grace with their album 1X, which I think there's a lot of 3 Days Grace fans that would be in agreement with me that, yeah, this is easily their best album. This is easily their best. I mean, I don't think they'll ever reach the heights that this album has reached, at least when we're talking the 3 Days Grace discography. I mean, yes, it is good to see that Adam is back with the band and everything, but, I mean, this is where it's at. This is where it's at, 1X. I mean, it's definitely their best album, I would say. Another album where you really can't go wrong with anything on this album. I mean, I think all the songs are good. I mean, yes, you do have songs that are better than others, but all in all, this album has their best songwriting and just some of their most memorable tracks, like, of course, Pain and Animal I Have Become, Never Too Late. I mean, these are, of course, 2000s classics at this point. Just great 2000s rock songs for sure. But I do like the opening track as well. It's All Over. I think it's a solid way to open up the album. On My Own, pretty good song. Even some of the deeper cuts I think are really good too, like Over and Over. This is actually one of the highlights for me off this album. I really do dig that song. It's actually one of my favorites off this album. Time of Dying, of course, is a fan favorite. Great song. Gone Forever I do like as well. So 1X by 3 Days Grace. Really good album. Really good album, and I would say it is 3 Days Grace's best work. And if you like 2000s hard rock, definitely give this a listen if you haven't heard it already. So next, we have Alice in Chains, definitely a legendary grunge band, their album Dirt. Now, when it comes to the Alice in Chains discography, most of the time when you ask the fan base what's their favorite album, it's either going to be this one or their debut Facelift. But for me personally, I got to put Dirt as their best. I got to put Dirt as their best because I think that this album is just solid start to finish. There's not a weak song on this album. I mean, yeah, you could say the same about Facelift too, but for me personally, I mean, it could just be a preference thing, but it's just all in all more enjoyable for me personally. I mean, this does have two of my favorite Alice in Chains songs of all time, and those would, of course, be Angry Chair and Wood. I love these songs. These are great songs, especially the song Wood, which is an Alice in Chains classic for sure, which every grunge music fan should listen to. There's other great tracks on this album like Them Bones and Rain When I Die. And of course, this has the classic Down in a Hole. Rooster, another classic. Title track. Lots of great stuff on this album. So Dirt from Alice in Chains. If you like grunge, definitely check this out if you haven't heard it already. So, in my opinion, Dirt is Alice in Chains' best album. And of course, rest in peace, Lane Staley. So next, Deftones, Around the Fur. Now, like with Alice in Chains, when you ask a Deftones fan what's their favorite album, you might get different responses. You might get responses like White Pony. I know that would be a very popular choice for a lot of people, I would imagine. And White Pony is a really good album. Diamond Eyes, you might get that as an answer. But for me, it's got to be Around the Fur. And I know a lot of fans would be in agreement that this is their best album. It has their best songwriting. It has some of their heaviest work. And the production on the album is also really good too. And some of their best work, without a doubt. Of course, you have My Own Summer, which is one of their best songs, one of their best opening tracks for sure. Title track, also really good. Be Quiet and Drive, a Deftones classic for sure. Just great guitar work and great vocals from Chino for sure. Lotion. So, lots of great stuff. Lots of great stuff on this album. So, if you like nu metal or just 90s music in general, I'd say check this one out. I mean, it's definitely worth checking out if you haven't listened to it already. I mean, it's a classic at this point. So, Around the Fur from Deftones. I think it's easily their best work. So the last album I'm going to name for this list is Sevendust, their album Home. Now, like with the others that I've mentioned, you might get mixed responses. And of course, it's all subjective on what album someone thinks is a band's best work. With Sevendust, you ask a Sevendust fan, what's your favorite album? You might get Animosity, you might get Seasons, and those are great albums too, but for me, I gotta go with Home. I think Home is the best thing that Sevendust has ever put out, in my opinion. A great album for sure, from start to finish. I mean, Sevendust is, of course, a really good band. Their early work, I think, is just outstanding. A lot better than their recent stuff, I would say. I mean, yes, I do like their recent stuff, but I just don't think it's as good as their classic material, their first 4 albums or so. I mean, those albums, I think, are just flawless. I think those are the albums where Sevendust was really at their best, particularly with this album, Home. A great album for sure. Denial is maybe my all-time favorite Sevendust song, a great song for sure, that just never gets old. You have Reconnect, another great track, Waffle. You also have Crumbled and Bender, also great. But yeah, just a solid album. Home by Sevendust. I think that this is Sevendust's best album. So that just about wraps this up. Let me know what you think. Are there any bands, in your opinion, that you think their second album is their best? Of course, feel free to let me know in the comments. And what did you think of these choices for second albums being the best from these bands? Of course, let me know all that as well. So with that said, thank you for watching. Have a good one.